Why do so many people stay in lives they hate? Not because they're lazy, not because they lack ambition, not because they don't know better. They stay because it's familiar. Familiar struggle, familiar dysfunction, familiar pain, and here's the hard truth. Most people would rather live with familiar suffering than step into unfamiliar possibility, because while pain hurts, uncertainty terrifies them more. This is what I call the comfort crisis. It's not about physical ease, it's about psychological predictability. People stay in jobs that kill their spirit, in relationships that drain their energy, in patterns that sabotage their growth. Not because they're broken, but because they know how to survive this version of suffering. They've built entire identities around it. Change threatens that identity. And when your identity feels threatened, your nervous system sees it as danger, even if it's good for you. Society sells comfort like it's safety, a steady paycheck, a predictable schedule, a life that looks normal from the outside. But here's the trap. Comfort becomes a cage when it costs you your growth. And most people don't realize they're stuck in a loop struggle. Relief, repeat, never full collapse, never real transformation, just enough relief to survive, not enough discomfort to truly evolve. Here's the twisted psychology. The toxic relationship is painful, but at least you know the rules. The dead-end job is soul-crushing, but it doesn't scare you. The self-sabotage hurts, but you've learned to live with it. However, unfamiliar freedom? That's chaos. That's unpredictability. That's risk. So you settle. Not because you don't want more, but because you've convinced yourself that you're safer playing small. But the real danger isn't failure. It's staying stuck in a life that doesn't require your full capacity. Let's break this down biologically. But first, if you're finding this valuable, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. We're not here to recycle surface-level advice. We're building real systems that protect your mind in a world designed to consume it. Your brain isn't wired for your success, it's wired for your survival. And to your survival brain, familiarity equals safety, even if the familiar is painful. If you've lived through it before, your nervous system says, "We know how to handle this. Let's not risk something worse." So when you try to change your life, when you try to set boundaries, quit the job, start the business, leave the relationship, or reinvent your identity, your brain triggers resistance. Not because it hates growth, but because it associates the unknown with danger. This is why progress often feels wrong. You're not failing, you're just feeling the friction of leaving a familiar identity. Here's the reframe that honestly changes everything. Discomfort isn't a sign you're in danger, it's often a sign you're in transition. But most people have never learned how to tolerate that kind of discomfort, so they go back. Back to bad habits, back to people who feel like home, even if home was chaos, back to versions of themselves that never fully lived but at least didn't rock the boat. You don't need more motivation. You need more capacity to tolerate unfamiliar discomfort. Because that's what growth actually feels like. Let's be honest, expansion is terrifying. Not because you're not capable, but because it forces you to leave the version of you that everyone got used to. What happens if you outgrow your circle? What if you succeed and feel even more pressure? What if you finally get the life you want and don't know how to live in it? These questions don't come from weakness. They come from internal wiring that's never been updated. When you start to break out of familiar pain, don't be surprised if it feels lonely. That's not proof you're going the wrong way. It's proof you're leaving a system that was built around your limitations. You might lose approval, familiar routines, and surface-level connection. But you'll gain self-respect, depth, space for alignment, and the clarity to finally ask, what do I actually want? Most people never get that far because they interpret loneliness as failure, instead of as a necessary reset. So the question isn't, why am I so stuck? It's, what version of me am I afraid to outgrow? Here's the truth that breaks the cycle. You don't need to eliminate fear to grow. You need to increase your capacity to move with it. Expansion isn't about blasting through your limits with brute force. It's about gradual nervous system exposure to what once felt unsafe. Think of it like strength training. You don't lift the heaviest weight on day one. You build tolerance. You increase capacity. You recover and return, stronger each time. Growth works the same way. You take small, repeated actions that teach your body, this discomfort is not danger. I can handle this. Here's where real transformation begins. Not in giant leaps, but in daily micro risks. Saying no when you're used to people pleasing. Speaking up when you normally stay quiet. Publishing the work before it feels ready. Asking for what you actually want, not just what's acceptable. These small actions feel huge when your identity is shifting because they carry emotional weight. They confront your internal wiring, and every time you do it, you build evidence. I'm not that old version anymore. That's how identity rewires. Most people wait for the fear to go away before acting, but fear isn't the signal to stop, it's the signal to prepare. Here's the rule. Fear plus stillness equals paralysis. Fear plus movement equals expansion. You don't remove the fear, you move anyway, slowly, intentionally, strategically, until your nervous system recalibrates and says, oh, this isn't danger, this is growth. That's when everything changes. At first, expansion feels like anxiety because it's unfamiliar. But over time, you start to normalize the feeling of growth. You stop interpreting fast heartbeat as panic, tension as danger, uncertainty as failure, and start recognizing activation as readiness, butterflies as excitement, discomfort as alignment. You begin to associate that internal stretch with becoming more of who you actually are, not less. Most people think success is about doing more, but for you, it might just be about becoming someone who can finally hold the expansion without collapsing back. Growth is not just about what you do, it's about who you become. And here's the final piece. If you don't lock in your new identity, you'll default back to the old one. That's why some people make progress, feel momentum, and then sabotage everything. Not because they weren't capable, but because the identity shift never felt safe enough to hold. So here's how you lock it in. Repeat until safe. Repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity creates safety. And safety becomes the new foundation for expansion. Every time you show up as the upgraded version of yourself, even in small ways, you're training your system. This is who we are now. Not once, not perfectly, but consistently, until it becomes natural. You don't have to hate the version of you that stayed small. That version got you here. It helped you survive. It gave you structure, even if it was limiting. Growth isn't about rejection. It's about graduation. You can outgrow something and still honor what it gave you. That's how you move forward without guilt. If you don't define your new baseline, the world will try to pull you back to your old one. Set new emotional minimums. Set new standards for who you allow around you. Set new internal rules for how you respond to discomfort. You're not doing this to prove anything. You're doing this to build a life that actually fits you. Let go of the pressure to be impressive. Anchor into the purpose of becoming undeniably aligned. Because when growth is rooted in pressure, it becomes performance. But when it's rooted in purpose, it becomes unshakable. You don't need to be fearless. You need to be ready enough. Ready enough to leave the cage of familiar pain. Ready enough to move before the fear disappears. Ready enough to live a life that matches your actual potential, not your past programming. This is the comfort crisis. And this is the invitation. Stay where it's familiar, or finally grow into the version of you that's been waiting underneath the fear. If this video spoke to something real inside you, drop a comment below. I'm ready to outgrow the old version of me. Like the video and subscribe if you haven't. We're building a new kind of mental power on this channel. Not for show, for real change. This content is for educational and motivational purposes only, and is not a substitute for mental health, financial, or medical advice. Please consult with qualified professionals when making life changes.